Hey everyone, I'm Amanda and this is Mommy's Reading Chair. All right, April has come and gone, which is crazy. I really expected this month to completely drag on forever, but it didn't. It felt kind of like a normal month. I know everybody's April probably felt a lot different than mine. However, with this global pandemic happening, my life has not really changed that much. Being a stay-at-home mom already, I'm already staying at home. So the biggest change for me is that my son is not going to preschool. My daughter, only being 8 months old, she's obviously not going to school anyway. So yeah, those are pretty much the biggest changes for me. I would have thought that I would get a lot more reading done this month, but it just kind of wound up being a normal month for me. My like extra work projects that I give myself for my teaching business and my husband's job and taking care of the kids and etc. None of that changed. So I didn't really have any extra time per se to read. That being said, I did hit the goal that I set for myself, which was 5 books and a small portion of another. So let's get started. The first book I read in April was The Rules of Magic by Alice Hoffman. This book was my 5-star prediction book. It was also an extra book club pick book that we had. I had predicted I would give this book 5 stars because I love Alice Hoffman as an author. I've read several others by her and I've just adored them. Unfortunately, this one fell flat for me. If you had told me that this was the same author who wrote The Dove Keepers, for example, I would not have believed you. I cannot say more amazing things about The Dove Keepers by Alice Hoffman. And so this one I really, really thought I'd love. It's a genre I generally like, magical realism, but it just didn't, something major was missing. And I honestly think the biggest problem I had with this book was the point of view used in the writing. So it follows a set of 3 siblings, and they are the like descendants of these witches in this town, and they are being denied their birthright. They're like, you know what, we're gonna hide these things that we have. The mom was like, I don't want you to have anything to do with your family and your powers. But of course, that's not how it ends up. They go and they visit their aunt in another town, and they learn all of the things that they are capable of doing. And the point of view is third person. It says, you know, Jet is sad about blah, blah, blah. And Vincent is feeling this way. And I really feel like if it had alternated, like this chapter's told by Jet, this chapter's told by Vincent, and so on, I think it would have felt a little bit better. I actually read this book with a friend of mine, and she said the same thing. She said this book has good bones. Like, it's a good story, but the execution was not, it just didn't feel right. Again, it follows these characters, and I just feel like the characters were not fully developed. And if you've watched any of my past videos, you know that I like a character-driven story, and unfortunately, this was not one. So I wound up giving this one a generous 3 out of 5 stars because I did like the story. I didn't like the execution. After that, I read Locomotion by Jacqueline Woodson. This was to fulfill the Baloo card that I drew for Disney Chooses My TBR, which means that I need to read a book that features a teacher. And I chose this book because I don't read a lot of middle grade books, but I do enjoy them. And I saw this one as an audiobook available unscripted. It was short, and it was just perfect for everything I wanted at that time. And this book, what a gem. I'm so glad I found it. First off, I use a lot of Jacqueline Woodson's picture books in my second grade classroom, specifically Each Kindness. That's my favorite one. But I had never read any of her middle grades books, so this was my first. And if you decide to read this book, I really highly recommend the audiobook version of this because the narrator was wonderful. The book is about a student, I believe middle school, who is, his name is Locomotion, that is his nickname, and he is in and out of foster care, he and his sister, and the book reads a lot like a diary, because it is narrated first person, he's telling his story, but again, it reads like he's writing it in a diary, which I really like. I don't know if that was intentional by the author, but that's how it certainly came across. And he meets this teacher of his, and this teacher recognizes that he's talented and that he's angry. And she encourages him and shows him how to express himself through his poetry. So throughout the entire book, there's different poems that he writes, just kind of interspersed between these almost diary-like entries. And it was such a good book. I really feel like it would resonate really well with a lot of students that I've known in my job as a teacher. And it was just such an encouraging story to hear that teachers do have an impact. Like, we know that as a teacher, I know that, but sometimes it doesn't feel that way. So to read something that uplifting, I really liked it. I felt like it was a great time for that. And I give this book 4 out of 5 stars. After Locomotion, I read the book We Are Water by Wally Lamb. This is the first book by Wally Lamb I've ever read, and it will not be the last. I was blown away by this book. This book fulfilled the Arial card, which means that I need to read a book with water on the cover, and not only did it have water on the cover, but it had water in the title. And this book completely blew me away. I loved the writing style. This was most definitely a book right up my alley. It follows a family, specifically Annie O and her husband or ex-husband Orion O. And it alternates between a lot of different characters narrating each chapter, but again, primarily from Annie and Orion's points of view. And there are so many subplots in this story that I really thought in the beginning that I would have a hard time following them. But this author is a master at keeping everything straight and fluid. And I never once got confused about what was going on. There's seriously so much that happens in this book that I'm not going to be able to cover it all. But essentially, Annie is married to Orion for a long time. They have 3 kids, a set of twins and another daughter. And they split up because Annie, who is an artist, moves to New York to pursue her dream. And she falls in love with a woman named Vivica. And Vivica is like this art... I don't know the right word. She's like an art collector in a museum. Like, I don't know. Just I think she like sells paintings. Anyways, she's rich. And Orion has a difficult time with this, not only because he's losing his wife, but because he's losing his wife to a woman. And that was really hard for him to deal with. So it goes with those issues, and you really get to know these characters deeply. I don't know if I've ever felt so connected with characters this much in a really long time. I'm trying to think of the last book I felt this connected. I honestly felt like I knew these people, and that is such a brilliant book. In the end, there are so many subplots that are going through this book, but in the end, he really wraps it up nicely. There are a couple of questions I still didn't get answers to, but honestly, I feel like it's such a realistic ending. I loved it. I can't recommend it any more highly, and I will 100% be reading more books by Wally Lamb. I give this 5 out of 5 stars. Any book following a 5-star book for me, I always feel really bad for, because the odds of it being as good as the last book are slim to none. But I grabbed The Immortals by Jordana Max Brodsky, and fortunately, it did not disappoint either. I feel bad because the last time I read a book that was given to me by my friend Shane was Dorothy Must Die. I think I read that in November. It was a few months ago. And it had followed a 5-star book, and it just fell flat. It wasn't as good. I had just read one of the best books I've ever read, and then it was followed by Dorothy Must Die. So I was disappointed, and I feel bad because Shane also gave me this book, and I also read it following a 5-star book. But regardless, this one didn't disappoint. I really was surprised by it. This one fulfilled the fantasy card, which I want to say was a Tinkerbell card. I have a few cards in the bucket that are fantasy, but regardless, it was a fantasy book card. And this one follows a character who is actually a Greek goddess. So the premise of this book is that the Greek gods and goddesses are real, and because they're immortal, they're still living amongst us in our present day lives. And this specific book follows Artemis. And I have to say, I don't really know a lot about Greek mythology. I know like the common ones. You know, I've seen Disney's Hercules, but I don't really know much past that. You don't have to know the stories prior to reading this. I was worried about that, but you do not need to know them. It flowed very well. So if you like fantasy and Greek gods and like murder mysteries and like crazy cults and a little romance in there, I really thought this book had a lot to offer, and I think I will be reading the rest of the series when I get around to it. I'm really bad about finishing series, but that is The Immortals by Jordana Max Brodsky, and I give it 4 out of 5 stars. After that, I read Blind Sight by Peter Watts. This book was to fulfill the Buzz Lightyear card, which is sci-fi. This book is actually a book that belongs to my husband. He hasn't read it, and I thought, you know what? It's sitting on the shelf. It is deep, true sci-fi, and I'm going to give it a go. It's not my usual pick. Unfortunately, I just didn't like it, and I don't think it's anything bad about the book. I just don't think this like deep, hardcore sci-fi is my thing. I was reading it and I had a very difficult time following it and understanding what was going on. So then I decided, you know what, let me start over, and I want to listen to the audiobook of it because it might be easier for me to process. And that is true. It was much better as an audiobook, but I still just didn't love it. I can't even really tell you a whole lot about it because I didn't really understand it. Maybe that's because I'm not smart, or I just don't remember anything good about this book. Unless you really like hardcore sci-fi, I would stay away from it. But if you want to give it a go, I would just go ahead and start with the audiobook. I do think some of the ideas were pretty cool around it. Like, it starts with this character who's a young boy, and his parents decide to get him like optimized. So they have half his brain cut out and replaced. So he's kind of like half human, half AI, which I thought was pretty cool. He's not a very reliable narrator, which I do appreciate in writing, but I just didn't feel it. Because I did think I liked the ideas okay, I wound up giving this 2 out of 5 stars, which is my lowest rating for the month. I was supposed to read a book for my book club called Beach Music by Pat Conroy. We all selected a different Pat Conroy book because we had plans to go visit South Carolina, which his books all take place in South Carolina. We were going to go on our annual book club girls weekend trip to South Carolina in May, but unfortunately, with the way everything is going right now in the world, we are deciding to stay safe and stay home. So we've postponed our trip to November, actually. It's like the next time we all could get together, which is really sad, for a trip. So I did not get to finish this book. It is also a whopping 763 pages. I definitely didn't finish it. I'm about 200 pages in and I'm enjoying it so far. But I think what I'm going to do is this book is just going to be something I pick at over the next few months. And my goal is to finish it by November, which I think I can handle. So I don't have any information on beach music for you this time, but I will once I finish it. And once I get a little deeper into the story, I might update you a little bit. But other than that, it was a really good month. A 5-star, 2 4-stars, a 3-star, and then womp womp, a 2-star. But that's okay. It's all uphill from here. I have plans to draw my cards, and I will post my May TBR as soon as it's ready. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please click subscribe and ring that bell for notifications, and I'll see you next time.